All right, it's time to get started here on a Wednesday night. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the Panther-Lair Show. I am Chris Peak. For Panther-Lair.com, you see the website address below. That's not a link. Don't click it. Just type it. Type those letters, Panther-Lair.com, into your browser bar. And go check out the site for the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Glad you could tune in tonight. It'll be a fun conversation as always, like we do it every Wednesday night for an hour here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, 8:30 to 9:30. Talk about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. Certainly plenty for us to talk about tonight as we wait for everybody to kind of stroll in here and see what people have to say, what's on their minds. Of course, if you want to join the conversation on the Panther-Lair Show, you can put your comments and questions right there along the right-hand side of the screen. That's where you can post them, and we'll get to as many as we can. Of course, if you want to make sure that we read your comment or answer your question, you can be a super chatter. Click a little $sign down there at the bottom. Somewhere at the bottom of the chat screen, there's a little $sign. Kick a couple bucks to the podcast. We appreciate that, and we certainly we will make sure to answer your question or read your comment as long as it's appropriate. I always click the button on YouTube that says this live stream is not for kids, but we're still going to try and keep it somewhat family friendly. I know people listen to the podcast later in the week. Sometimes looking at the numbers, I'm never sure. I think we still get more listens and more downloads on the audio podcast than we get on the video of these live shows. But get as much as we can. Get as much as we can on the video side, and we appreciate everybody who tunes in on the audio side. I always think it's more fun to be here live when we're doing the show, because you can be in the conversation. It's sort of a talk show that we do here with some back and forth where I say a thing and then you respond to a thing, and then we go back and forth about a thing, and then you guys get off in your own little conversations on the side. And sometimes I'll be like, I need to check up on the chat screen, see what's been going on there, catch up on it. And it's just all these conversations that have nothing to do with me or what we're talking about here. It's just your own side chats. So have at it. That's what we're here to do on a Wednesday night hangout for an hour. Hopefully you'll get a chance to come down to Stage AE and hang out tomorrow night. I think it's actually sold out. I can't believe this. The Draft 412 party tomorrow night at Stage AE is sold out. So I've been telling you about it for the past few weeks here on the live show. I've been talking about it all week on the Morning Pit. Telling you go to draft412.com to get your tickets to the draft party tomorrow night at Stage AE. We're going to watch the first round of the draft together. There's going to be a couple hundred people there. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about the draft as it happens. Merrill Hodge is going to be there. It's going to be a blast. And I've been telling you to go get tickets. Well, hopefully you listen, because the tickets are sold out. So I look forward to seeing everybody there. If you didn't get tickets, now you know for next year. Hopefully they do it again, because I'm sure it's going to be a blast. And so hopefully they do it again next year. You can join us then. But if you didn't get tickets, you should still check out draft412.com. They're building something pretty cool over there. Coverage of all the pro sports teams' drafts here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, plus keeping an eye on college prospects who would be of interest to local sports fans. And so it's pretty cool what they're building. They're still putting it together and kind of building out their content wing and whatnot. But it's going to kick off tomorrow night with the draft party, and I'm really looking forward to it. If you're there, say hello. I'm going to be there. I think Jim Hammett from our site is going to be there as well. We're going to talk about draft guys and Pitt prospects and things like that. It should be a lot of fun. So hopefully you can make it down to Stage AE tomorrow night for the Draft 412 first round party. Watch party is what it is. It's a watch party. We're all going to get together and watch the first round of the draft together. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun. Draft wise, and we'll have our draft preview episode of the Morning Pit tomorrow, and we'll talk a lot about that tomorrow. So, chances are if you listen to this podcast on Thursday and you listen to the Morning Pit on Thursday, you might hear some overlap as we talk about draft prospects and whatnot. But Kalijah Cansey's obviously the guy that I think everyone is going to have an eye on tomorrow night. He's the one that is expected to be drafted tomorrow night. I think it would be a surprise if he's not drafted tomorrow night in the first round. I think everybody expects him to. I don't know where he'll end up. You read all these different mock drafts. Nobody really has any idea. Is it Bryce Young? Is it C.J. Stroud? How high does Jalen Carter go? And, Who takes Will Anderson? How many quarterbacks get drafted in the first round? I saw a mock draft today or yesterday with like 5 quarterbacks in the first round. Is that really going to happen? I don't know. 5 seems like a lot. 5 seems like a lot, especially if there's only 1 last year. Obviously, different strengths of the quarterback classes that we're seeing sort of year to year. But if you're a Pitt fan, and I think if you're watching the NFL draft from a Pitt perspective, the next 2 days after tomorrow are going to be far more interesting than tomorrow is. Tomorrow, Kalijah Kancey is going to get drafted. It's just a question of when and where he goes. And that'll be interesting to watch. There's no question about it. You always like to see those Pitt guys you've gotten to know over the years, guys that you've watched grow and develop over the course of their careers. It was always fun to watch them get a chance to realize their pro football dreams. But there's not a ton of suspense in it. There's far more suspense and far more interest in seeing what happens with Izzy Abanikanda and Carter Warren and Brandon Hill and Servassier Dennis and Haba Baldonado and maybe even guys like Eric Howard or Jared Wayne or Marcus Minor. There's a solid 9 guys who potentially could be drafted this year, which is pretty exciting. Since and I'll credit Jim Hammett for digging this up. I think since the NFL went to the 7-round format for the draft in 1994, I think it was, Pitt has never had more than 6 players drafted. They've done it twice. They had it in 2004 and 2021. They had 6 players drafted in each of those drafts. They got a real chance to match that this year. And if the cards fall right and the right team has the right interest in the right player, you could potentially see 7 guys go. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's possible. It could be 5, or it could be 7. Who knows? I really, and I'll talk about this on the Morning Pit tomorrow. I'll go more in depth. I really like Brandon Hill's potential. I really do. I think the only knock on Brandon Hill, from my perspective, from watching him play and then seeing how he measured and tested earlier this year at Pitt's Pro Day, the only knock on Brandon Hill, to me, is that he's a little bit short. He's probably 2 inches shorter than you would like him to. You'd like the safety to be 5'11" or 6 foot, and I think he's 5'10". You would like, which puts him 2 inches or so shorter than, and maybe even 3 inches shorter than, I think Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think, is listed at 6'1". You look at the Steelers' other safeties, they're all right around that 5'11", 6 foot range. And so he puts him on the shorter end of it. But he also weighs 190 pounds. He outweighs a bunch of the guys who played for the Steelers. And so he's got some bulk to him. He's got physicality from playing a very physical position. That boundary safety spot in Pat Narduzzi's defense is not for the weak of heart. You've got to be strong, and you've got to be physical, and you've got to be willing to entertain contact and engage and initiate contact. And there's a reason that position ends up being the leading tackler more often than not. And you can find it dating back to Narduzzi's days at Michigan State. You go look year by year, the leading tackler was often a safety, and it was usually that boundary safety, that guy coming down in the box, playing in run support and cleaning up a lot of plays. And Brandon Hill excelled in that role. I saw one knock on him was his low college production or lack of college production. But the reality is, I guess, at least in terms of interceptions and making plays in the passing game, there's not a lot of opportunity for that boundary safety position to do a lot of that, to put up those kinds of numbers. They're going to put up a lot of tackles. They're going to put up those stats and be very involved in the defense on a play-to-play basis beyond just dropping back in coverage. And so, I think Brandon Hill excels in that role. I think he's done really well at Pitt over the course of 2 years as a starter. He's been a reliable player. He's been on the field a lot. I don't think he's really missed much time due to injury or anything like that. And he's been, like I say, a physical player. And so I think he's got a chance to be really good when he gets to the NFL. I really do. And I'm excited to see where he ends up, where he gets drafted, and what his career ends up turning into. And something else I was thinking about, and again, I'll probably get into this more in depth on the Morning Pit tomorrow, but I I think there is something to be said for playing in this defense, particularly if you're a defensive back. We talk about Narduzzi has had 6 defensive backs drafted at Pitt, and he recruited 5 of those guys, or signed 5 of those guys. He didn't recruit or sign Avonte Maddox. Maddox would have been the one guy that he didn't, but he signed Jordan Whitehead. Whitehead was committed to Paul Chryst, but he ultimately signed with Pat Narduzzi. Same thing with Dane Jackson. He signed him, even though Dane, was committed to Paul Chryst and played for Pat Narduzzi. And then he recruited, signed, and developed Jason Pinnock and Damari Mathis and Damar Hamlin. So he's had 6 defensive backs drafted already. You would think at least one in Brandon Hill gets drafted this year. To be 7 defensive backs drafted since Narduzzi arrived in 2015. You go back and you can see guys at Michigan State, defensive backs that got drafted there as well. And I think there's something to be said for DBs who play in this defense. I think NFL coaches and scouts and evaluators do put some extra respect on it. Partially because it's a demanding defense, and I think you have to be pretty good to play well in this defense. Partially because it tests you, I think it really puts you, particularly for corners, it puts you on an island, and you either sink or swim. And there are going to be times when you bust and give up a play, and it's, well, how do you bounce back from that? And I think you can get a real sense of a corner's resilience when they play in this defense, because it's unforgiving. It's really an unforgiving defensive system, and I think NFL scouts and coaches have some real respect for that. So that should help, I would think, with a guy like Brandon Hill. Potentially even help with a guy like Eric Hallett. And I think next year it's going to help with guys like MJ Devonshire and Marquez Williams and AJ Woods, assuming all those guys come out. I think Woods, is out of eligibility. Devonshire and Williams, Williams, this is Williams last year too. I think Devonshire potentially could come back if he chooses to do so. But my guess, if he has another year this year like he had last year, certainly if he scores 3 touchdowns, if he has 2 pick sixes and a punt return touchdown and plays pretty solid in coverage again, I don't think he's going to come back. And so you're going to see probably that kind of youth movement at corner next year that you're seeing at defensive line and safety this year. But those guys, I think, will get a little bit of an extra bonus in their grades by the NFL scouts for having played in this defense. Now, it's not going to make a guy a first-round pick if he doesn't do a lot of other things right. It's not just like, well, that was a corner in a Narduzzi defense, we got to draft him, and we probably have to draft him in the first round or something crazy like that. But I think when you're looking at a guy and you see him test really well and he's got good film and he's productive, and he's a good player and he's physical and all that, and then you say, oh, and he's also playing in Narduzzi's defense, that's worth something. I also think these guys do. Pat Narduzzi made a comment right around Pro Day or right before Pro Day about an NFL scout said to him, Coach, when I'm talking to this one player of yours, it's like I'm talking to a coach. He just really knows the game so well. And I think that comes from playing in this defense as well. I think it, particularly at safety and linebacker, I think it sort of breeds really smart football players. You look at Travassier Dennis. He's a really smart guy as it is. He probably would excel, and his IQ would be on display in any defense he played in. But I think this one really accentuates it. I think it really does. And I think that helps these guys as they prepare for the draft process. And I think that's why there have been, 6 defensive backs under Narduzzi, 6 defensive backs, 3 defensive ends, 1 defensive tackle, and no linebackers. But that's 10 guys on defense that have been drafted. Offensively, of 1 receiver, 1 receiver, 2 running backs, 4 offensive linemen, and 2 quarterbacks. So that's 9. So 10 defensive players and 9 offensive players drafted under Narduzzi since Narduzzi got here. Now, he didn't recruit all those guys. He didn't recruit James Conner. He didn't recruit Tyler Boyd. Some of the offensive linemen, he didn't recruit Brian O'Neill. So a handful of those offensive guys he did not recruit. He actually only recruited one offensive lineman, one running back, and two quarterbacks who got drafted. Of the players Narduzzi recruited who got drafted, there have been 12 total. 5, 6, 8 of them, 8 of the 12 have been defensive players. 5 DBs, 2 DNs, and 1 D tackle, Jalen Twyman. The 2 DNs being Weaver and Jones, Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones. And he's had 4 offensive recruits drafted. It was, who is it? Quadri Olson. And then the 2 quarterbacks, Kenny Pickett and Nathan Peterman. And then, who was the offensive lineman? Jimmy Morrissey. Jimmy Morrissey came to Pitt under Pat Narduzzi. So, definitely sort of a defensive imbalance there in terms of Narduzzi's recruits or players getting recruited. But I think partially because, this comes back to something we've talked about earlier this week on the Morning Pit. We talked about Narduzzi's transfers, how they've taken a lot more transfers on offense than they have on defense. And I think partially it's because they've recruited better on defense. And I think that is borne out when you look at some of the draft numbers too. In addition to this defense, I think, helping prepare guys for the pros and making them more attractive as pro prospects. So, bringing it back around to where we started, I think these next 2 days after tomorrow are going to be the really interesting ones when we look to see where Izzy Abanikanda goes, because that's another offensive guy who's going to get, another offensive Narduzzi recruit who will be drafted. Carter Warren, where's he going to go? Another offensive Narduzzi recruit who will be drafted. And then Servassier Dennis, potentially the first linebacker that Narduzzi has recruited who got drafted. Haba Baldonado, another defensive end. Obviously, Kalijah Cansey, what we talked about. But we're talking about those guys in the second round and beyond. You got a lot of defensive players in there as well. And it's going to be interesting to see where they go. See if any of them end up staying in Pittsburgh. I don't know who would be a good fit in Pittsburgh. Brandon Hill. I think Brandon Hill would be a pretty good fit, but that's just because that's the guy that I'm kind of behind on this one and sort of really think he's going to be better than people maybe expect. I don't know. Do the Steelers need Izzy Abanikanda in the 3rd round or 4th round or something like that? I'm pretty sure they have bigger needs than that. They don't need to go for him. I don't know. Steelers take maybe a Carter Warren. Could the Steelers work in like a guy like a Haba Baldonado? Could Servassier Dennis fit in the Steelers defense as an inside linebacker? That would be an interesting one to watch. I think there's a few guys there, a few guys among the Pitt players who could be interesting prospects for the Steelers. I don't know if you would count Jordan Addison in there. That would be another receiver that Narduzzi recruited and signed who gets drafted, but I don't know if he would count in those numbers. But, maybe he could end up as a potential Steelers target. But whether they play in Pittsburgh or whether they play somewhere else, it'll be fun to watch where these guys end up going and who they end up getting drafted by. It's always exciting this time of year for sure. All right, let's see. Got here. Scrolling through. See if there's anything else I want to talk about before we get into the comments and questions portion of the show, which is always, if you want to post your comment or your question, you can do that right over there in the chat screen. Right off to the side. I think it's up on this side, right? Up on the right side of the screen. You see it over there? Yeah, post your comments or your questions, your thoughts on Pitt's draft prospects and things like that. Speaking of draft, we didn't talk about this on the live show last week. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about it on the Morning Pit. Just happened late last week. Blake Hinson announced that he's going to test the draft process and make a decision, go in for feedback, the early entry process. Of course, the NBA has it set up where a player can do that and can get feedback about whether he's ready to be drafted into the NBA or whether it would be in his best interest to go back and what he needs to work on, that kind of thing. Is basically get feedback. The NBA has it set up so you can do that, but also then return to school. If you find out that you're not really ready to make that jump yet, you can go back to school. The NFL, once you declare you're in and college is over for you, The NBA has kind of an escape clause there where you're able to test the process and then come back. And I think a lot of guys who test the process don't come back. Justin Champagnie said he was going to test the process. He did not come back. Justin Champagnie also averaged a double-double in the ACC and a couple of 2020 games and probably looked at it and said, what more can I really do at Pitt? You know, even if I go in and the feedback I get is that I'm not ready to be drafted, what more am I really going to accomplish to show these guys? I'm either in or I'm out. Blake Hinson. So Blake Hinson's going in this process, and I suspect Hinson's going to get feedback that he should go back to college, that he has a number of things he could work on: defense, improve rebounding. I knew he was Pitt's leading rebounder, but he still only averaged like 6 a game. He could improve his rebounding. He could probably get in a little bit better conditioning, a little bit better shape. He could get better at driving with the basketball and basically doing more than just shooting. And I know he did more than just shooting last year. I'm not going to say he was only a shooter in this past season. Like I say, he led the team in rebounding. But I think the feedback he's going to get is probably going to be, you have a lot to work on. And so my expectation is that Hinson will return. We'll see. Just because it seems to make the most sense for a guy to make one decision doesn't always mean that they make that decision. That's like we can look at it from the outside and we can say, is Blake Hinson ready to go to the NBA? And the reality is I think we would all agree that probably no. And he might get feedback from the NBA that says probably no. But that doesn't mean he won't go forward with the process and jump in. My guess is he will come back, but we'll see. He's obviously a big piece for Pitt next season. All these things that they've added, I don't think, with adding Ishmael Leggett and Zach Austin, and maybe, as they continue to work on landing a couple other guys, it's not quite like last year where everything sort of seemed to be geared toward building around John Hughley. It's not like that they're trying to do everything to build around Blake Hinson. But Blake Hinson is the biggest returning piece from last year's roster. I mean, he's the best player from last year's roster coming back. Certainly is the leading scorer and leading rebounder on the team last year. I mean, you would make that case that there's no one really bigger than him. But it's still not the same. It's a different kind of team. It's built in a different kind of way, and there are different pieces coming back that wasn't necessarily the case last year this time. I mean, last year this time you had John Hughley. You had Jamarius Burton, and you had Nike Sabandi. And Sabandi was coming off an injury. So, I mean, you had two sure things. It was Hughley and Burton. And you really didn't have much else. You knew what you needed. You knew you needed a lot of extra pieces. And you needed shooters, and you needed this, and you needed that. But you didn't really have... It wasn't the same sort of setup as this year. This year, you've got Hinson coming back with Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins. Dior Johnson, but you don't know what to expect out of him, and you have the 3 freshmen coming in. You don't know totally what to expect out of them, but you have high expectations for them. I think the expectations right now for the freshmen, particularly Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe, I think the expectations for those guys are quite a bit higher than the expectations were for the Diaz-Graham twins and Federico, at least what you were expecting out of their first year at Pitt. I think there are pretty high expectations for what Jalen Lowe and Carlton Carrington are going to be able to do this coming season as true freshmen at Pitt. And those expectations are higher than what the coaches were expecting out of Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins last year at this time. So it's a different kind of team, not necessarily built around Blake Hinson, not entirely riding on the shoulders of Blake Hinson the way last year this time it felt like it was built around John Hughley and entirely riding on the shoulders of John Hughley. But Hinson is a huge piece of it. The team looks markedly different without Blake Hinson if he were to decide to pursue the NBA. So it's obviously for the better if he comes back, if he does not leave for the NBA, but he's going to test the process and see what kind of feedback he gets. My guess is he'll return. He does seem like he genuinely liked playing at Pitt. He liked being a part of the Pitt program, appreciated being part of the Pitt program after everything he had been through, sort of pretty tumultuous period with Ole Miss and Iowa State. Like, he was happy to be here and happy to be a part of this program. I mean, he certainly said it a lot. Jeff Capel said it a lot. And so my guess is, unless they come back and say, yeah, you're like a lottery pick or whatever, I would guess he's going to be back for his final year of eligibility. And I think he does. He just has one left. So this will pretty much this will be it for him. He'll be done here either way. But it's something to keep an eye on. When he made that announcement last Friday, I think it was. Something to keep an eye on. Otherwise, just kind of still keeping an eye on the transfers there. Noah Thomason, the really high-scoring guard from where's he from? Niagara. I'm drawing a blank here. Noah Thomason is a transfer guard, from Niagara. Had a huge season last year. Averaged, I think, close to 20 points per game, right? 19.5 points per game, I think. He was the leading scorer for Niagara. Where's the scoring here on your... 19.5 points per game. A little close to 4 rebounds per game. I had 100 assists, so about 3 assists per game. Just a really good player. 48% shooter from the field, 38.6% shooter from three-point range. He's coming in for a visit next weekend, but he's got some visits between now and then. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to expect, and not this coming weekend, but next weekend, like Cinco de Mayo, I think is when his visit is. There's a part of me that says Pitt's got a lot of guards on tap already. They've got a lot of guards here. There aren't going to be a lot of minutes to go around. And, so is a high-scoring, prolific guard like Noah Thomason gonna want to join that situation? But then there's another part of me that says, well, we're at a point now where a lot of schools have a bunch of guards. So maybe he's looking at this similar situation in just about every opportunity. And so maybe that part of the playing field is a little bit more level than I expected. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect there. I think the first step is just to get him on campus and not have him commit to St. John's or Penn State or whoever before he gets here for a visit. I think the first step is to get him in for a visit, and then you can start trying to convince him of what his role could be and how he could fit in with his team. But if you were to land a guy like him to go with the 11 they already have, I mean, you're getting to a point where it looks like the minutes crunch is going to be real and fairly drastic. If everyone stays healthy and no one gets in trouble or anything like that, you'd be in a real minutes crunch if you start adding guys like that as like scholarship number 12. I mean, he certainly would not rank as number 12 on this roster if he were to join the team. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think they're able to be pretty selective right now with the transfers, with just a couple spots left and the roster sort of filled up the way they've done it so far. Now, being selective doesn't necessarily mean that they can, that they have their pick of players, but they don't need to take a body just to take a body. They can they've filled their needs, I think, and so I don't think they're in any kind of desperation mode to get these other spots filled up. So we'll keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the transfer portal, of course. Pitt football working through the transfer portal as well. Actually, here Justin just asked in the chat thoughts on Noah Thomason. Well, there you go, Justin. I was doing it before you even asked that question. So I mean, we'll see. It's just I felt for a while that it's going to be tough to like with a big guy like a center or power forward. I felt like it would be tough to get a guy who's gotten a lot of minutes and is coming in expecting a lot of minutes. It would be tough to get that guy because he would look at the roster and say, okay, you got Blake Hinson, you got Federico, you got the Diaz-Graham twins. Where are my minutes coming from? Like, where am I going to play? This is a guy who was averaging 36 minutes per game last year at Niagara in Noah Thomason. Is he going to look at Pitt's depth chart or look at Pitt's roster and say, all right, I have played 36 minutes per game at Niagara last year. Where exactly am I playing next year? Like how am I fitting in at Pitt. And that's something that you kind of have to recruit your way out of. You kind of have to sell it. And I think it's a tough sell because you've got, now you've got Leggett at one of the guard spots. You've got Dior Johnson, who, even though he hasn't played, I mean, other guys know about him, and he's got a reputation as being a really good player. And you've got 2 4-star guards coming in. And so you might look at it and say, I don't know, coach, I was playing 36 minutes per game at Niagara. I don't know if I need 36 minutes per game in the ACC, but I'd like to get 25 or 30, and am I going to get that kind of minutes? I don't really see how that's going to work out. And so that gets tricky. And I think it could be a tough sell for Jeff Capel. But again, you got to get to a point where he gets on campus for a visit, and then you can actually work on it. If you get him on campus for a visit, you got a realistic shot. Anybody you can get in for a visit is a realistic option. Now, there's varying degrees of that, but it's a realistic option. So that's goal number one, is just getting through these next couple of visits that Thomason is taking, and then going from there, and hoping you can get him here and trying to recruit him after that. Let's see here. Oh, I'm going to tell you about our friend Chris Gates. Chris is, you know about Chris, the Wednesday night live show. It's always sponsored by Chris Gates Fitness. I've talked to you guys about Chris a bunch of times. He's an online fitness coach from Pittsburgh. He works with people all over the world to create customized fitness and nutrition programs that work. And he's also a huge Pitt fan, and he loves supporting our show here on Wednesday nights on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. He's actually got, at his website, chrisgatesfitness.com, he's got a lot of new content right now to help you start getting ready for summer. And first up, it's a brand new podcast episode this week that focuses on what you need to do to slim your midsection and build your abs. And who doesn't need to do that? Believe me, I think we all fit into that boat. He'll also have a brand new article this week on the best exercises to build your abs, actually coming on Monday. So you can look forward to that. It's all at chrisgatesfitness.com. So that's Chris, C-H-R-I-S, that's easy enough. Gates, G-A-T-E-S, fitness.com to find links to the podcast and articles and Chris's mailing list and everything like that. I can't recommend him enough. I've known Chris for a long time. He's a great Pitt fan. He's a smart guy. He's funny, and he really knows his way around the fitness world. It's fitness, lifestyle, health, nutrition, just general healthy living. That's what he's offering at chrisgatesfitness.com. So, and he supports us, so we really appreciate it. You should go and check it out. chrisgatesfitness.com. All right, I'm going to get into some of the comments and questions. And actually, Anthony Tennyson, talking about Noah Thomason, says, Anthony says, Noah Thomason will get more minutes than the freshman. I would think so. All right, I would think so. I mean, that would make sense. Of course, you would play Noah Thomason more than, Jalen Lowe or Carlton Carrington. But the thing is, how much more, right? I don't think you're going to bring in Carrington and Lowe and give those guys 10 minutes per game. I think those guys are coming in expecting to play more than that, and I think you expect to play more than that. And even if their minutes are, let's say the freshmen play 20 or less, you still have Dior Johnson, you still have Ishmael Leggett. It's still going to be hard to get Noah Thomason 30 minutes per game. I think you're in a minutes crunch, and you need a guy who's willing to accept a backup role. Now, if you could get a Noah Thomason, he's not going to need to accept a backup role, but now you're going to have to massage the situation with Dior Johnson and Ishmael Leggett, right? And then the 2 freshmen coming in, right? We've got this new guy who's going to take up one of the starting spots and play 30 minutes per game. Well, okay, where's that going to go? Is that, well, one of the guards could play the 3. Okay, that's good, but you just brought in Zach Austin to play the 3 as a transfer, right? And he's expecting to play major minutes. Now, you can make it all work. I think there's ways to make all the numbers work, but it gets trickier. And you don't just have to make the numbers work. You have to convince the players that the numbers will work. So when Noah Thomason comes in for his visit, you have to convince him that those minutes can exist. And if he sits down and he says, all right, coach, you got Ishmael Leggett. All right, he's pretty good. He's probably going to play a lot of minutes. You got Dior Johnson. Everybody knows about him. He's going to play a lot of minutes. You've got these, Carrington and Lowe coming in. They're 4-star guys. I mean, they're highly rated prospects. They're coming into play. These are freshmen who are not coming in to sit on the bench in redshirt. These are freshmen who are coming in expecting to have major roles from the get-go, and now you're bringing me in. How are we all going to split this up? How are we going to split up all these minutes among 5 guys? Because I'm having a hard time seeing it. One of us will play the 3. Okay, well, you also brought in this other guy to play the 3. How are the 6 of us, going to split up these 3 spots? Are we all just going to play, what would it be, 100 minutes, 20 minutes a game? Because, Coach, I was playing 36 at Niagara. I want more than 20 minutes per game. So I think you can make the numbers work. Convincing these guys that the numbers can work is the salesmanship of it. That's the sell. And I don't think it's easy. It's not undoable, but it's not going to be easy. So that's what will be interesting to watch when it comes to that recruitment. Let's see here. Byron Flex says, any report on the Pitt football and basketball players who've gone to the portal? Keaton Slovis to BYU, John Hughley to Oklahoma. Haven't heard where others have landed. What do you know? I don't know where Nate Santos ended up. I don't know if he's picked a destination yet. Football-wise, we do have a list there on Panther-Lair.com. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 Pitt football players who are on the roster to start last season who are left for the transfer portal, and they all have destinations so far. So Keaton Slovis went to BYU, like you said. He's going to play his final year there. Vincent Davis went to UNLV, where Brendan Marion is the offensive coordinator. That'll be Vincent Davis's final year of eligibility, so he's heading out there. And I'll say this: I hope Vincent Davis has a really good career at UNLV, or a really good season, I should say, at UNLV. I like Vincent Davis. I like how he played. I think he always played hard. He was a smaller guy, but I can't say he didn't play like it. He was small. I mean, when you're small, you're small. But he played hard. He ran hard. He seemed to be a pretty good teammate to the point where I even heard that maybe there was some disappointment on the team that he didn't get more opportunities in that finale at Miami last season, that regular season finale where, they're playing about as close to his hometown as they're going to get. And he, it's a blowout game, and they're giving Sibo Flemister more carries than Vincent Davis. I wonder if the rest of the team wasn't a little disappointed about that, just because they knew the situation. It was his hometown. It's the regular season finale, one of the last games he's probably going to play at Pitt, and he's not even getting the chances to run in a blowout situation, a game where a situation where the game was over. So I wish the best to him. I hope he has a great career or a great season, like I say, at UNLV. Hopefully he gets those opportunities. He's actually going to be playing with Gavin Thompson, former Pitt walk-on who went on scholarship. He transferred out to UNLV as well. I assume on scholarship. I'm not sure what. I don't think those details, they don't usually get announced, But he's out at UNLV. Might be his final year of eligibility. I don't know how much eligibility he had left when he transferred out of Pitt. Jaden Bradley is at Charlotte. So Jaden Bradley, who I think is a really talented wide receiver, had a chance to be, was just on talent, was probably one of the most talented receivers Pitt had last season. Showed flashes of it, and also showed flashes of just being not a liability on the field, but unreliable and unpredictable and, kind of chaotic. Whether it was, penalties on special teams or some of his stuff in the passing game. I think the coaches felt like they couldn't really trust him. And I think there was probably some friction there between Jaden Bradley and the coaches, and which ultimately led to him transferring at mid-season. Well, despite the talent that he seems to have, he ends up at UNC Charlotte. I don't know if I thought he would go to a Power 5 school. I think he expected to go to a Power 5 school, but that's not what happened. So best of luck to Jaden Bradley. Hopefully he kind of settles in, focuses on what he's really trying to do and what his goals really are, and hopefully he has success at Charlotte. Jalen Barden, our old friend Jalen Barden, Georgia Southern. is where he transferred to after the season. Barden just could never really get on the field for whatever reason. I think there were issues with mastering the offense is sort of what kind of got out. That he obviously had speed and talent, but just couldn't really master the finer details of the passing game, and that was a problem. There's so much that's tied into details. You got to be at the right spot at the right time, and he wasn't reliable to do that. So he had to. So they didn't play him, and I think it was probably pretty frustrating for him not to be playing, given the state of the passing game and the receivers last year. But that ultimately led to his transfer. So he's going to Georgia Southern. And then Miles Alston, the most recent player to go into the transfer portal, announced, I guess, earlier this week, he's going to Old Dominion. So 4 receivers leave Pitt. 4 scholarship receivers leave for the transfer portal. Charlotte, Georgia Southern, UNLV, Old Dominion are the destinations. Kai Wright, tight end, left last year, last offseason, I guess. He ended up at James Madison. John Morgan transferred after the season. I don't remember. I don't think he played in the Sun Bowl. I think he was gone by the Sun Bowl. I forget I think he was. But anyway, he went to Arkansas. We'll see what his final season of college football looks like playing at Arkansas. Sam Williams, a defensive end, transferred to Murray State. Khalil Anderson. This one was a real disappointment for me. If you read Panther-Lair.com or really if you've been watching these podcasts for a few years, I really touted Khalil Anderson. I thought Khalil Anderson was going to be a stud. He was a tough one for Pitt to hold on to. They had to really battle going down the stretch. Michigan's coming after him. I think Notre Dame was pushing for him. Michigan State really wanted him. It was a battle to keep Khalil Anderson in that recruiting class of 2021, and Pitt ultimately signed him. And I thought he was going to be a stud. I thought he was going to have an impact as a true freshman. He didn't. Didn't play at all. And ultimately, I think he moved to safety last year. That didn't really help him get on the field. And he went in the transfer portal and ended up at East Tennessee. I don't know. I still think there's a lot of potential there. I still think the guy can be really, really good. Maybe he'll go to East Tennessee and just light the world on fire and be a real stud, be the kind of stud that we expected him to be, or that I expected him to be. But it's a shame it didn't work out here. Hopefully it works out at East Tennessee. And then the other one, Judson Tallender, safety, transferred to Akron. And Tallender and John Morgan, I think, are probably in the same kind of boat. I don't think they were pushed out necessarily. That's the best way to put it. I don't think the coaches tried to talk them out of coming back. They may. I don't know. I don't know what the conversation was. I wouldn't be surprised if it was something along the lines of, we don't have room for you to return, because most of those guys are in their super senior years this year. So it's kind of an extra year of eligibility that's not entirely accounted for. And it wouldn't be surprised if the coaches said, look, we just don't have room to bring you back for one more year. And the reality is, they might be right about the scholarship situation, but the reality is, for John Morgan at defensive end and Justin Tallender at safety, yes, they're turning over a lot of players here and going with a lot of youth this year. But if they bring John Morgan back, they might lose one or two of those young defensive ends to the transfer portal. So one more year of John Morgan could cost you 3 years of Nikai Johnson, or 4 years of Sam Okunlola, or 4 years of Jimmy Scott, or something like that. And I think similar situation at safety. One more year of Judson Tallender will give you an older, somewhat more experienced safety to run out, in the secondary. But it might cost you 4 years or 3 years of Javon McIntyre, 3 or 4 years of Stephon Hall, or one of these younger safeties who are probably looking at it like, finally, I'm getting my chance. I'm getting my opportunity to get out there and be on the field and play and actually contribute, So, I don't know if the coaches said you have to leave, but they very well might have said we don't have room for you to come back for this year. We brought you in expecting you to be here for 4 years or 5 years. We didn't really expect for you to be here, 6. We didn't plan the roster that way. And so those guys moving on. It's interesting when we look at those, how many did I say? 3, 6, 9, 11 players who've left Pitt to the transfer portal. You really have one who went to a Power 5 school. John Morgan went to Arkansas. I don't know if you count BYU. They're like independent, right? So Keaton Slovis went to BYU. I guess you could count them. But in terms of Power 5 schools, John Morgan's the only one out of this group of 11. And if I go back to last year, let me see if I have my list here. See if I can bring it up. Because it was similar last year. No. See if I have it. Here it is. Yeah. So out of last year, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 guys. Out of 17 players who left Pitt last year to the transfer portal, I think 4 went to Power 5 schools out of 17. Wendell Davis went to Northwestern. Cam Bright went to Washington. Davis Bevel went to Oklahoma. And then, of course, Jordan Addison went to USC. 17 players leaving for the transfer portal. 4 went to Power 5 schools. Conversely, when Pitt brought in 8 guys last year, they brought in Keaton Slovis from USC, Shane Simon and Sibo Flemister from Notre Dame, Dylan Devaney from Georgia Tech. So actually that's a little bit lighter than I expected on the Power 5 additions. But if you look at this year where they lost 11 guys and only 1 went to a Power 5 school, they brought in 6 now, and all 6 are coming from Power 5 schools. So I don't know what you make of that. I think you can go back and forth. There's probably a few different interpretations. One, I think when you look at only 1 out of 11 guys leaving end up at a Power 5 school, I think that would probably speak to, you'd probably say, well, maybe those departures don't hurt as much as you think they did. If those guys, if other schools didn't view them as being capable of playing at the Power 5 level, maybe you didn't lose all that much. Now, when you look at the guys that you bring in 6 guys from Power 5 schools. You'd like to think that means, well, you're getting a higher caliber player. It's kind of, not to go too far down the road of talking about transfers in these sort of bigger picture terms, but I feel like there's 2 approaches, right, to take with transfers when you're bringing guys in. You either want the really talented guy who went to a Power 5 school and maybe just got passed up by more talented guys, but he's good enough to help you get better. Or you want that standout guy at the lower level, group of 5 schools, FCS schools, D2 schools, who is, has grown and developed into a player who's outplayed his current level, and you feel like he's a Power 5 caliber player and you want to bring him in to fill out your roster. And I think Pitt has gotten some of each. Shane Simon as a linebacker coming in. This year, obviously, they have, Donovan McMillan and Derek Davis. These Power 5 guys, Malcolm Epps, who, we actually haven't even talked about here on the live show. We didn't bring that up. That happened between Wednesday nights. But these guys who maybe, seem like good, talented Power 5 caliber players, but they got passed up by more talented Power 5 caliber players. But then they've also had the Stefano Millen coming in from Kent State, Tyler Wiltz coming in from Missouri State, Kanate Mumfield coming in from, Akron. They've had some of these lower level guys who've come in and been a major addition, where they've taken a guy from that lower level who, outplayed their level. You know what I mean? Was clearly at a higher, capable of playing at a higher level than where they were at. Oh, Lucas Krull would be another one. And Johnny Patrician would be another one. Guys who transferred from Power 5 schools where they weren't getting as much usage. And Pitt said, hey, we can actually do something with these guys. We can win with these guys. And so they've had a mix of both. And I don't know if one way is better than the other. I don't know if one approach is better than the other. I think they both have their merit. You just got to find the guys who fit what you're looking for, and find the guys who are going to help you get better and win games. Oh, Justin points out that BYU is in the Big 12 now. I keep forgetting that they're that's right. I keep forgetting they're in the Big 12 this year. So I apologize for that. I thought they were still independent. I get mixed up in remembering not just who's moving to which conference, but when they're moving to those conferences. You know what I mean? Like, when are Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC? Cincinnati and UCF are moving, and Houston are going to the Big 12 this year. But Texas and Oklahoma are leaving for 24, and BYU is in now. And I get mixed up on those details of the movement, not just where the schools are going, but when they're going. So thanks for pointing that out, Justin. So you have 2 out of 11, I guess. 2 out of 11 guys who left Pitt via transfer this year ended up at Power 5 schools. Keaton Slovis at BYU, John Morgan at Arkansas. So, again, you can make of that what you will. Let's see. What else we wanted to... Oh, one other thing about Keaton Slovis I wanted to talk about. Just if you watched the Morning Pit this morning, we talked about the top 10 transfers that Pat Narduzzi has brought in. And I gave my top 10. It's a slight change from last year. I moved MJ Devonshire up to number 4. I moved Shane Simon into the top 10. I put him in at number 9. So move some guys around, bump some guys down, drop some guys out. And I didn't have Keaton Slovis in the top 10. And somebody on Twitter, and actually somebody on the message board, said, I think he's got to be in the top 10. He was the starting quarterback for the majority of a 9-win season, and the team was ranked and all this different stuff. And I really, it never crossed my mind to put Keaton Slovis in the top 10 of Pitt's transfers under Pat Narduzzi. It really didn't. It never crossed my mind that he would be a guy to consider for the top 10. But he was the starting quarterback for the majority of a 9-win season. He did, was the quarterback for the team when, they got ranked and this and that. He had a big game against Miami. He had a big game, threw for 300 yards and a touchdown against West Virginia. I guess I just look at it, and Keaton Slovis was 7-4 as a starting quarterback. It's not that great. He had 2, he played really poorly in 2 losses that ultimately cost Pitt a shot at going to the ACC championship game, the Georgia Tech and Louisville games. I mean, he was not the only reason they lost those games. But the offense bears the brunt of the blame, and he in particular played really poorly. His stats for the Georgia Tech game ended up being decent, but it was all backloaded in the final 2 drives of the game. First half, first 3 quarters, he was pretty bad. And then obviously the turnovers that he had in the Louisville game ultimately sunk them in that one. So I just have a hard time putting him in the top 10. Now, I do have DJ Turner in the top 10. DJ Turner had 2 good games at Pitt, I have, Taysier Mack and Kylan Johnson and Johnny Patrician. Are you putting Keaton Slovis over... Well, so that's the bottom 5, all right? So top 5, I had number 1, Nate Peterman, number 2, Marcus Minor, number 3, Stefano Millen, number 4, MJ Devonshire, number 5, Lucas Krull. I can't put Keaton Slovis over any of those 5. Maybe you can, I can't. But the bottom 5, number 6, I had Johnny Patrician, number 7, Kylan Johnson, number 8, Taysier Mack, number 9, Shane Simon, and number 10, DJ Turner. Are you putting Keaton Slovis over one of those guys? Patrician, Kylan Johnson, Taysier Mack, Shane Simon, DJ Turner. Maybe DJ Turner, because he had 2 games, and that was it. Shane Simon, he's a pretty good player for Pitt last year, and I think he's gonna play an important role this year. Taysier Mack had 2,000 receiving yards over the course of 4 years. Caught 9 touchdowns or something like that. Had a couple big plays along the way. He had a lot to do with them winning the Coastal Championship in 2018. He made some big plays to help them win the Coastal and the ACC in 2021. I mean, I don't think I can put Keaton Slovis over him. Kylan Johnson and Patrician, I just think they played better. Kylan Johnson was here for 1 year. Patrician had one big year in 21. And I think each of them in their 1 year were better and helped Pitt win more than Keaton Slovis did in his 1 year. It's just me. It's just my opinion, but I don't know. I have a hard time putting Keaton Slovis over any of those guys. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But it was funny when somebody mentioned it because I just had not considered Slovis at all. I hadn't considered him for a spot in the top 10, but oh well. We'll keep considering this and reconsidering it, and I might re-rank him again before the end of the summer, and certainly we'll re-rank again next year. It's kind of fun. We have a running list now. Pitt has brought in, so far, counting the 6 that they've got so far this year, the 5 who were here for spring camp plus Malcolm Epps, they have brought in 36 transfers under Pat Narduzzi. So it's a big group. And, when they've all played after this coming season, we'll re-rank the transfers again next year and see where they all stack up. But we'll be keeping an eye on football transfers, basketball transfers, the NFL draft, the recruiting. It's starting to heat up. We're almost to May. And May means that before you know it, it's going to be June and official visits and June recruiting and all the chaos that comes with that. So here's looking forward to that fun because it is fun. It's always exciting when you get into the June recruiting. We'll have plenty to talk about for sure here on the live Panther-Lair Show, and of course the Morning Pit every day right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So do me a solid and like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can turn on your notifications so you never miss anything that we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You get an alert sent to your phone when we go live or we post new videos or anything like that. You don't want to miss it. So youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe and turn on those notifications. Thanks everybody who watched the live stream tonight. We appreciate it. Thanks everybody who joined the chat. It's been a lot of fun as it always is. Hope everybody has a good rest of the evening. We'll be back, of course, tomorrow morning with the Morning Pit, and then another one on Friday, and then we'll keep doing those every day of the week, Monday through Friday, and then we'll be back as we are every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. right here for the Panther-Lair Show. So thanks again for watching. Hope you've had a great week, and hope it continues to be good. And enjoy the NFL Draft. We'll be sure to talk about it coming up over the next few days and at Panther-Lair.com. So thanks again. We will talk to you soon, and we'll see you. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.